Welcome to this week's episode of Body Weekly. I'm your host, Dr. Madeleine. Today we'll be looking at injuries to the elbow joint, in particular, elbow dislocations. I will be joined by our sports expert, Andrew Profundus, to introduce us to an elbow dislocation in basketball. Then, my favourite co-host, Dr. Dane will join me to explore the anatomical structures that make elbow dislocations possible. Finally, we'll be joined by Dr. Amna, who will walk us through x-rays and treatments of elbow dislocations. Let's get started by catching up with Andrew Profundus. Take it away, Andrew.
So the injury we're about to watch occurred in the Milwaukee Bucks Phoenix Suns April 3rd game late in the 2009-2010 NBA season. Andrew Bogut, the starting centre and the best player for the Bucks at the time, goes up for a dunk on the fast break midway through the second quarter. Friendly warning before the footage is shown, this injury may make some viewers feel uncomfortable, as it did many of my co-workers in the making of this episode.
1 minute after missing the 3 games. How about that pass? To Bogut. Uh-oh, watch out. Oh, no. Andrew Bogut came crashing down, and that
his arm's
was
out.
Ugly. Oh, my goodness.
His right elbow is dislocated.
Oh, my goodness. That was horrific.
Broken. Jeez.
Man.
I can tell it is not in position right now. And Mario Stoudemire trying to get out of that way, trailed it the whole way. And Bogut got up on that rim. And I don't know if Amari clipped him or the momentum of Bogut going to the basket, but that right arm is out, and that young man is in some pain.
Oh, boy, your stomach just drops. And Bogut in serious agony as they're going to help him off the court, holding on to that right arm. Steve Nash is over here along with the Suns coaching staff as they wondered exactly what happened on this play, and we'll take a look at the replay.
You see that overhead pass, length of the court pass. Mario Stoudemire never saw it coming. He was trying to get out of the way, and I just think that you see his arm just gets right up underneath his bottom side, and can't tell if Stat's right arm pushed him in the back or if he just tried to, get out of the way. But either way, Bogut positioning, his legs came back way back up underneath his body, and he comes down right on the small of his back, and his arm got caught underneath his body. And that does not look good for the Milwaukee Bucks and Andrew Bogut.
Let's take a closer look at what actually happened. As Andrew Bogut holds onto the rim in order to slow himself down and gain balance, he loses his grip at the start of his action, leading him to fall in a dangerous way and causing him to land on his arm and back with considerable force. The commentators did a pretty good job at covering the injury as it occurred, both in what type of injury it was and how the injury actually happened. If we follow Andrew's right arm here, we can see that he used his right arm to break the fall, causing an unnatural bend mostly at his elbow. His elbow joint bent outward, taking so much force that it dislocated.
Before we unfold the incidents that happened to Andrew Bogut, I would like to illustrate a thorough overview of the elbow joint.
Let's get started by getting acquainted with the elbow in the standard anatomical position. The bony features of the elbow are articulated between the humerus proximally in the upper arm, the radius laterally, and the ulna medially in the forearm, which allows the hand or upper limb to be adducted or abducted away from the body.
Structurally, the joint is classified as a synovial joint and functionally as a hinge joint. A synovial joint, also known as diatherosis, is surrounded with a fibrous joint capsule that is continuous with the periosteum of the joint bones. The joint continues with the outer boundary of synovial cavity and surrounds the bone's articulating surfaces. The synovial joint is filled with synovial fluid to lubricate and nourish the joint while acting as a shock absorber as well. The ends of the joint bones are covered with smooth glassite hyaline cartilage, which reduces friction when movement.
Yes, but the elbow joint is also a hinge joint, which is formed when the cylindrical end of a bone fits into a trough-shaped surface of another bone, like that of the elbow, when the humerus and the ulna meet. These joints act as a hinge, allowing flexion and extension in just one plane. This occurs along the sagittal plane and the mediolateral axis.
The proximal radial ulnar joint, formed by head of the radius and radial notch of the ulna, is a pivot joint that allows for the bones of the forearm to rotate around each other. This crossing over gives rise to supination and pronation movement of the forearm. Maddie, let's talk ligaments that stabilize the elbow joint, shall we?
Sure thing. Like all synovial joints, as mentioned before, the elbow joint has a capsule enclosing it. This in itself is strong and fibrous, strengthening the joint altogether. The joint capsule, however, is thickened medially and laterally to form collateral ligaments, which stabilize the flexing and extending motion of the arm. But before we go into the collateral ligaments, we need to discuss the annular ligament of the radius, which connects to the radial notch of the ulna. This is a ligament from the proximal radial ulnar joint. The annular ligament of the radius wraps around the head of the bone and attaches to the ulna anteriorly and posteriorly. The surface of the annular ligament is lined with synovial membrane and allows the head of the radius to rotate inward during supination and pronation, while maintaining stability of the radio-ulnar joint. Then you have the two collateral ligaments. The radial collateral ligament is found on the lateral side of the joint, extending from the lateral epicondyle of the humerus and blending with the annular ligament of the radius. The ulnar collateral ligament, however, originates from the medial epicondyle and attaches to the coronoid process of the anterior side and the olecranon of the ulna on the posterior side. The ulnar collateral ligament is a thick triangular band with three main bands: the anterior or cord-like band, the posterior or fan-like band, and the oblique or transverse band. The oblique or transverse band also helps to deepen the trochlear notch. So, as well as ligaments in the elbow, you also have bursa. Bursa are sacs of fluid, synovial fluid, which help to cushion the elbow joint itself in three places, and they reduce friction during movement.
Yay! Now it's time for the muscles!
Why are you always so excited about muscles?
It's so great! Like, that's what moves you. So, movement of the elbow and its three articulations comes mostly from the biceps and triceps muscle. Basically, the biceps flex and the triceps extend. But there are a few other muscles involved that are all related to the biceps and triceps in a way. So, we can divide the muscle into anterior and posterior compartments.
So, we'll get started with the anterior compartment of muscles and its action specifically to the elbow. The main muscle in the anterior compartment is the biceps brachii, which has a long and a short head. The origin of the long head is the supraglenoid tubercle of the humerus, and for the short head, that is the tip of the coracoid process of the scapula. Both of them, however, insert into the radial tuberosity and fascia of the forearm via what is known as the bicipital aponeurosis. The biceps brachii flexes and supinates the forearm at the elbow joint. Then we've got the brachialis, which is deep to the biceps brachii and originates from the distal half of the anterior surface of the humerus. It then inserts into the coronoid process and tuberosity of the ulna and helps flex the forearm at the elbow joint. Next on the list is the brachioradialis, which is a muscle found distal to the biceps brachii. It originates from the proximal 2/3 of the lateral supracondyle ridge of the humerus, and it inserts into the lateral side of the styloid process of the radius at the hand. This muscle also flexes the elbow. Finally, we have the pronator teres muscle, which originates at the medial epicondyle of the humerus and coronoid process of the ulna. It then inserts into the middle of the lateral surface of the radius. This muscle, along with the pronator quadris, which can be found at the distal radio-ulnar joint, pronates the forearm at the elbow joint. So, you can now do the posterior side.
Yes! So, the triceps brachii has three heads, with long head originating from infraglenoid and tubercle of scapula, then the lateral head originating from upper half of posterior humerus, and the medial head originating from the distal 2/3 of medial and posterior humerus. All of them insert into the posterior surface of the olecranon process of the ulna. These muscles extend the forearm. Aconius is a small triangle muscle which originates from posterior surface of lateral epicondyle humerus and inserting into lateral surface of olecranon and posterior proximal ulna. It assists the triceps brachii. So there's another small muscle but important. It is the supinator, which originates from the lateral epicondyle of the humerus and supinator crest and inserts into the lateral, posterior and anterior surfaces of proximal third of radius.
And I'm going to assume that it supinates at the elbow.
Bingo! There's also the interosseous membrane that connects the radius and ulna. It acts to the stability of the elbow joint complex. Its fibers are directed medially and inferiorly to facilitate transmission of force from the hand to the radius, then to the ulna, and finally to the humerus, to the elbow. The cubital fossa then is a triangular area on the anterior surface of the elbow joint formed by the borders of the arm and forearm muscles. The apex points inferiorly towards the hand. The medial side is formed by the pronator teres. The lateral border is formed by the brachioradialis. The superior border is then formed by the imaginary line joining the medial and lateral apicondylar humors. The floor is formed by the supinator and brachialis. And lastly, the roof is from the deep fascia of the forearm, reinforced by the bicipital aponeurosis.
In a normal situation, we cannot really hyperflex the elbow joint, as the biceps brachii would stop the forearm. However, as per hyperextension, it is remarkably easy to injure the elbow if this happens by force. So say if the person falls and impacts totally on an outstretched hand, like Andrew Bogut did to break his own fall. When the hand hits the ground, the force is sent to the elbow. Usually there is a turning motion in this force. This is what drives and rotates the elbow out of its perfect socket and is maintained by other tissues and ligaments.
Vessels supplying blood to the elbow joints are the two main arteries there. They are the radial artery and the ulnar arteries and their branches. Sensory innervation of the elbow is anteriorly from the muscocutaneous, median, radial, ulnar, and posterior interosseous nerves, and posteriorly from the ulnar nerve. The humeral-ulnar and humeroradial articulations of the elbow joint are served by the muscocutaneous, C5 to C7, radial, C5 to T1, and ulnar nerve, C8 to T1. Crossing the elbow joint anteriorly is the median nerve, C5 to T1.
The superficial fascia of the cubital fossa contains a variable arrangement of superficial veins, as well as the medial and lateral cutaneous nerves of the forearm. The cephalic vein is lateral, the basilic vein is medial, and the median cubital vein joins both of these two veins together. The median vein of the forearm ends in the median cubital vein, and the contents of the cubital fossa formed from lateral to medial are the tendon of the biceps brachii, the brachial artery, and the median nerve. Due to his privacy rights, there was no detail released on his actual injuries. So, we're going to show you some x-rays of what we think are the closest resemblance to Andrew's injuries. And to do this, we're going to introduce Dr. Amna pronator teres.
Andrew's injury was a complex dislocation. It had severe bone and ligament injuries. These two x-rays are done in lateral and anterior posterior views. These illustrate the injury as a complex dislocation. There is a fragment of bone from the medial epicondyle of the humerus as well as the ligament of the elbow joint. Looking at the x-ray, it appeared to be a radial loosened, medial epicondyle fracture and lateral displacement of the olecranon of the ulnar as well as the radial head. An elbow dislocation should be considered an emergency injury. There are two types of treatment for elbow dislocations, non-surgical and surgical. Non-surgical treatments realign the elbow joint to its proper position. The normal alignment of the elbow can usually be restored in an emergency department at the hospital. The act of restoring alignment to the elbow is called a reduction maneuver. This is done gently and slowly. Two people are usually required to perform this maneuver. Surgical treatment. If blood vessels or nerve vessels are injured, additional surgery may be needed to repair the blood vessels, nerves, bone, or ligaments injuries. Late reconstructive surgery can also successfully restore motion to some stiff elbows. This surgery removes scar tissues and extra bone growth or fragments. During the 1 year span that Andrew suffered from his injury, it became apparent that his radial, median, ulnar nerves were affected. In addition, he could not freely extend and flex his arm as much as he wanted to. Thus, the movement in the sagittal plane and around medial lateral axis was compromised. Over time, there is an increased risk of arthritis in the elbow joint if the alignment of the bone is not good, causing the elbow movement to be limited. Rehabilitation is then one of the most successful ways to improve the range of motion. Some people will never be able to fully open the arm even after physical therapy. Fortunately, the elbow can work very well even without full range of motion.
Well, I know guys, it was a lot to take in.
Yes, it was, and you better remember it because it's going to be in your final exam. I'm Dr. Lumbricals.
And I'm Dr. Dane Brachialis.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Body Weekly.